Karen Masters said the HOA was taking my house over $2,860, and every damn cent of it was made up. No warning, no hearing, just pay or get out. So I did the only thing I could. I went to war. You know, the first time I saw this house, it was just a patch of dirt with flags stuck in the ground. No pavement, no lights, just red Georgia clay and a crooked little sign that said Channing Cove, Phase 1. My wife Danielle was pregnant with Jayla back then, and I still remember how she looked standing there in sandals, swatting gnats, trying to imagine where our living room would be. We didn't have money, I mean, not real money. I was driving freight nights and weekends for 2 different carriers and running dispatch on the side. Danielle was teaching 4th grade and trying to keep her feet from swelling up like softballs. We weren't what you'd call HOA material. Hell, we barely qualified for the loan, but I was determined. I'd grown up in apartments where the walls were thin enough to hear your neighbors argue about cable bills. I wanted something solid for my family, something that was ours. I took every extra run I could find. Sometimes I'd go from Charleston to Tallahassee and back with 2 hours of sleep just to make enough for the down payment. My hands hurt from the steering wheel, my knees cracked from crawling under trailers, but when we finally signed the paperwork and I carried Danielle over the threshold like some broke-ass king, that was the best moment of my life. We were one of the first 5 families to move into Channing Cove. The neighborhood was small back then, just a cul-de-sac and 2 short streets branching off. No sidewalks, no street lamps, but the trees were tall and the air smelled like pine and fresh lumber, and we thought we'd found our forever home. I planted a crepe myrtle in the front yard the second weekend we moved in. It was barely 2 feet tall, and I told Jayla, who was still in a onesie, that tree's gonna grow with you. That thing's taller than the house now. The early days were good. Everybody knew each other. BBQs, baby showers, folks waving when they passed your driveway. Back then, the HOA was just a bunch of volunteers trying to figure out how to keep the landscapers from mowing down the cable boxes. The president was a guy named Liam Trevors, retired Coast Guard, real straight shooter. He'd walk around the neighborhood in a straw hat talking about drainage and asking if anyone saw the water bill spike again. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. You paid your dues, the grass got cut, the lights stayed on, and if somebody's mailbox got knocked over, 3 neighbors were out there fixing it the next day. We didn't always agree, but at least you knew who you were dealing with. Then Karen moved in. At first, she was just another neighbor with an opinion, always correcting people at meetings, always asking to review the budget draft before it went public. But she brought cookies, smiled wide, and wore these awful garden gloves with flamingos on them. Nobody took her seriously, not until Liam stepped down and she ran for president. Unopposed. That's when things started to change. Meetings got weird, shorter, less talking, more motions. Suddenly things weren't discussed, they were voted and closed. Karen rewrote half the bylaws within her first year, added decorum clauses, and made the community newsletter digital only so nobody could manipulate delivery. People stopped showing up to meetings and Karen didn't care. She said we were streamlining governance. Danielle didn't like her from the jump. She said Karen had that play nice in public but cut your throat in private energy. But me, I tried to stay out of it. I figured, hey, as long as the grass gets cut and the fees don't spike, let the board do their thing. For a while, it worked. It's nice. We paid our dues. We kept to ourselves. I ran my business, grew it out of the spare room, and into a legit operation. Danielle moved up to 5th grade. Jayla got braces and started winning art contests. The neighborhood kept growing, and Channing Cove went from 12 homes to over 40. And Karen, she never left the board, never gave up the gavel. You know how in small towns, there's always that person who's not technically the mayor, but everyone knows they're running the show anyway? That was her. She had her little circle, the decor committee, the standards council, the finance review subgroup, all unofficial, all unlisted, but somehow every vote went their way. Rules got stricter, fees got higher. One neighbor got fined for repainting their door the exact same color it was before, just without submitting a form first. And slowly, quietly, people stopped talking. You could feel it, like the neighborhood was holding its breath all the time. Nobody waved anymore, block parties disappeared, folks stopped walking dogs after dark. Everybody just wanted to stay off Karen's radar, including me, but you can only stay quiet for so long before someone decides your silence means weakness. And when Karen decided to come after me, she didn't just pick a fight, she made it personal. I was in the garage changing the brake pads on Danielle's car when it happened. Just one of those Saturday things. Jayla was sketching in the driveway, earbuds in, hoodie up, beautiful day, not a cloud anywhere. Then Danielle stepped out with this white envelope in her hand, holding it like it smelled bad. "You get another letter from the HOA?" I wiped my hands on a rag and took it. Same cheap printer paper, same logo in the corner. That phony cursive font Karen loved, trying to make homeowners association sound like some dignified institution, not four neighbors on a power trip with a mailbox. I opened it, expecting the usual newsletter or maybe a reminder about dues. But no, this one was different. Short, cold. Notice of non-compliance. Unauthorized architectural modification. It took me a second to figure out what the hell they were talking about. Then I saw it in the body of the letter. Glass panel inserts installed on garage door without prior submission and approval by Architectural Standards Committee. This constitutes a violation of Channing Cove Covenant. 4.3b. Fine assessed $300 must be paid within 30 days to avoid additional action. I laughed out loud. Danielle didn't. They're talking about the garage windows? Apparently, yeah. See, a few months earlier, I'd swapped out the top row of panels on the garage door with tempered glass inserts. They weren't some wild design, just clean frosted panes to let in natural light. The old panels were warped from sun exposure, and I figured if I'm replacing them anyway, might as well let a little daylight in. Simple upgrade, looked clean. No neon colors, no blinking lights. Hell, half the neighbors had similar ones. No one from the HOA had said a word when I installed them. No emails, no notes, nothing. But now, suddenly it was a code red emergency. I walked out into the street to take a look at the house like maybe I'd missed something obvious. Maybe they were reflecting sunlight into someone's face. Maybe the glass looked different from far away. But no, it was just a garage door. Clean even. Neat. Danielle takes more photos of that house than a real estate agent. It looked good. I sent Karen a quick email, short and polite. "Hi Karen, I received the violation notice today. Just wanted to confirm if this was a mistake. I replaced damaged garage panels with frosted inserts. Nothing structural changed, and I wasn't aware this required prior approval. Happy to discuss." 2 days later, she wrote back, "No greeting, no sign-off, just one line. This was not a mistake. You're responsible for adhering to the covenant." I blinked at the screen. That was it? No explanation? No rationale? No follow-up? I replied again, more formal this time. Asked if she could point me to the specific requirement. Maybe provide a form I could retroactively submit. Said I was open to resolving it and just needed to understand what the issue was. She didn't reply at all. A week went by. Then 2. Then I got another letter. This one said, "Second notice, outstanding violation, non-payment. Same $300 fine plus a $50 processing surcharge." Now I was pissed. Not just at the money, it's not like $300 was going to sink me, but the way it was done. No transparency, no photos, no explanation of the process. Just, "You're in trouble. Then, now you owe more." Like they were stacking late fees at a payday loan place. Danielle kept saying to let it go. Just pay it. It's not worth the headache. She'd seen how HOA drama tore up her cousin's neighborhood a few years back. That one ended with 2 lawsuits and a guy getting his tires slashed. But it didn't sit right with me. This wasn't some massive remodel. This wasn't a 4-car garage with strobe lights and a stripper pole. It was glass, decorative, functional, and nobody said a damn thing about it until after the fact. So I sent one more email. Not to Karen, straight to the official HOA board inbox. I attached photos of the door, a copy of my Home Depot receipt, a screenshot of another home on our street with the exact same window setup, and I asked in plain language, "Can you please explain how this constitutes a violation and what criteria were used to assess this fine? If this is enforceable, I'd like to know why others with similar features have not received notices." Guess what I got back? Nothing. Dead silence, and that's when something shifted in me. That fine, it wasn't about the money, it was a warning shot. One of those little jabs people use to test how far they can push you, like poking a dog through the fence to see if it bites or backs off. I didn't bite. Not yet, but I sure as hell didn't back off either. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't about glass panels. This was about power, and Karen Masters had just made the mistake of thinking I'd roll over. At first, I thought maybe it would blow over. I figured, okay, maybe the board's just disorganized, maybe someone forgot to reply, maybe Karen's busy crocheting new ways to ruin someone's weekend, but it didn't blow over. 2 weeks after that second notice, I came home and found another letter stuffed into our mailbox, no envelope, just folded in half, like someone didn't even care if it got wet. This one had bold red letters at the top. Final notice, non-compliance fee due immediately, risk of legal action, over windows. But it wasn't just about the windows anymore. The letter now listed multiple violations, some of which I'd never even heard of. Failure to respond to HOA directive. Dissemination of unofficial HOA information to community members. Attempt to influence or intimidate board members via electronic communication. I swear to God, I sat on the edge of my truck bed reading that thing over and over, thinking maybe I'd opened someone else's mail by mistake. Danielle came outside and asked why I looked like I was about to drive the truck through a wall. I handed her the letter. She read it twice and just said, "This is starting to feel like a setup." And it did, because suddenly it wasn't just about glass panels. Karen had clearly decided I was a problem. And once you're labeled a problem in a place like Channing Cove, they don't just fine you, they try to bleed you out. I found out later she'd sent an advisory email to all homeowners warning them not to engage in unauthorized neighborhood messaging and potentially libelous discussions regarding HOA decisions. I hadn't even spoken to anyone directly. I'd asked 2 neighbors, 2 if they'd ever gotten fines for house upgrades. That's it. And now I was apparently leading a rebellion. It got worse. One morning, Jayla came into the kitchen holding a flyer she found stuck to the front door. It was from the HOA, same flamingo logo watermark Karen had insisted on a couple years ago. It said they were considering a community maintenance levy to address ongoing challenges with shared infrastructure. The cost, $300 per household. Due next month. No meeting. No vote, just a notice. That's when I really started digging. I pulled out the last few years of HOA documents, what little we had. Most were just PDFs emailed once a year with budgets that looked like they'd been thrown together in Excel by a middle schooler. They never included receipts. No invoices, just big vague categories like beautification, $6,000, and pond management, $32,000. Mind you, we have one pond, and it's the size of a backyard swimming pool. Nobody swims in it, nobody even goes near it, but apparently it costs more to manage than my wife's entire yearly salary. I sent an email asking to review the financials, not accusing anyone, not hostile, just asked for transparency. Karen replied with a 2-line response. All financial summaries are available via the community portal. Further documentation requires formal board approval. That portal, half the links were broken. The other half just led to scanned copies of spreadsheets that looked like someone had used whiteout and typed over the cells. It was obvious they were hiding something. I wasn't the only one who thought so either. My neighbor, Mr. Mercado, quietly told me he'd asked the same question last year and got ignored. I figured, fine, I'll just keep everything documented. Keep it civil. Keep it legal. But then the lien notice came. I got home from a supply run and found a thick envelope duct taped to the front door, like they wanted the whole neighborhood to see it. Inside was a notice of intent to lien for non-payment of fines and fees totaling $2,260. Let me repeat that. They tried to place a lien on my house for under $3,000, most of it coming from fines that I'd never agreed to, for violations they never proved, under rules they refused to explain. Danielle thought it had to be a mistake. She was already on Zillow, convinced we were going to have to sell and move. Jayla, poor girl, kept asking if she could still have friends over, or if the HOA would show up. I told them both we weren't going anywhere, but truth be told, I didn't have a clue what to do. I reached out again, this time to the entire board. No answer. 2 days later, Karen herself sent a typed letter via registered mail. The language was cold as stone, legal-sounding, almost smug. As you have failed to remedy multiple infractions and continue to disregard established HOA protocol, we are proceeding with lien placement under Georgia State Code. And so on. But there was one line that really stuck with me. This matter could have been resolved amicably through cooperation and appropriate apologies. Regretfully, you've chosen confrontation. Apologies? They wanted me to apologize? For what? For asking where our dues were going? For putting glass in my garage? For not bowing down to Karen and her fake little kingdom? That was the moment it clicked. This wasn't incompetence. This wasn't poor management. This was punishment. And if they could come after me for this, they could come after anybody. That's when I knew. I couldn't just fight this for myself anymore. I had to burn their whole damn playbook. The day after I got the lien notice, I sat in my truck for a long time, parked at the bottom of the driveway, just staring at the house. Jayla's bike was leaned against the porch railing. Danielle's gardenias were blooming in that little square bed she'd built with her own hands. That damn crepe myrtle tree I planted 15 years ago was casting shade across the front step, just like I said it would. And all I could think was, they want to take this from me. Over lies, over a few $1,000s they invented, I wasn't ready to go to war. Not yet. Not until I knew I'd done everything I could to solve it the right way. So I took the high road. I called a local attorney, real estate and civil litigation, not cheap. The consultation alone ran me $400 and a couple hours of awkward small talk about how common these HOA things are nowadays. The guy looked over the lien notice and said, "Yeah, they're pushing the limits, but the language is just vague enough that it could hold up if they filed in small claims. Georgia gives these associations a lot of rope." I asked what my options were. He said I could pay it and sign a waiver, basically admitting guilt and promising not to sue, or I could send a formal rebuttal requesting documentation, which they'd probably ignore. Filing a lawsuit? That'd take months and at least 5 figures, probably more, so I started small. I wrote a certified letter to the board, not just Karen, to all of them. I kept it calm, polite, professional. I laid out the facts. I requested the meeting, minutes where my violations had been reviewed and approved. I asked for photos, timestamps, emails, anything they had, and I requested a hearing, an in-person, open forum to state my case. Never got a response. 3 weeks later, I hand-delivered the same letter during what was supposedly the monthly open meeting. I showed up at the community clubhouse, an old rented church room on the edge of the subdivision, with copies in hand. Only 2 board members were there, no Karen. They told me the meeting had been rescheduled. I asked when. They said, "We'll notify the neighborhood." Spoiler, they didn't. I called the county office to see if they had any oversight over HOA activity. They didn't. Said it was a private contractual matter. I asked if they could at least investigate the lien. They said that's a civil court issue, not a county one. I filed a complaint with the Georgia Department of Law, Consumer Protection Division. Their response came in the form of a beautiful 2-page nothing burger. After review, we find no grounds for direct enforcement action, but encourage you to resolve this matter through private legal channels. Danielle was watching me spiral. Every night, I was buried in PDFs and phone calls and printed copies of old bylaws. I wasn't sleeping. I'd stare at the ceiling, wondering if they could actually force a foreclosure over this. We didn't have debt. We weren't behind on mortgage payments. And yet we had this weight over us now, threatening everything we'd worked for. I tried going neighbor to neighbor, quietly. I wasn't trying to stir up drama, I just wanted to know if anyone else had gone through something similar. Most people didn't even want to talk about it. Some just shook their heads and said, "Man, you don't want to get into that mess." Others closed the door mid-sentence. One guy said, "I got fined $200 for trimming the wrong side of my hedge. Paid it and moved on. Ain't worth the stress." Only one person actually opened up, an older woman named Miss Paulette, 3 doors down. Her husband had passed a couple years earlier. She told me in this soft, tired voice, "They sent me a notice saying my mailbox was an inch too short, charged me $50. I called Karen and she said I should consider it a donation to community upkeep." A donation. That's what she called a fine for a mailbox she didn't even change. At that point, I knew the scope of this thing was bigger than just me, but I still wasn't ready to take the gloves off. I reached out to a nonprofit I found online, some HOA accountability group out of Atlanta. They specialized in helping homeowners navigate stuff like this. They couldn't take the case, but they gave me a list of lawyers, advised me to document everything, and told me what keywords to look for in the governing documents. Things like due process, quorum, fiduciary duty. So I did. I dug through every HOA file I could get my hands on. Every amendment, every revision, every newsletter. Half of it was fluff. The rest was Swiss cheese, contradictions, outdated clauses, missing vote records. The more I read, the more obvious it became. Karen and her board weren't just mismanaging this place. They were running it like a private club, making up rules as they went, and daring anyone to stop them. Still, I gave them one last shot. I drafted a full appeal. 6 pages, cited the bylaws, listed the procedural violations, itemized every error in their lien notice. I sent it by certified mail, return receipt. Waited 2 weeks, then 3, finally got an envelope back. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No header, no signature, no explanation, just this. The board has reviewed your appeal and determined that no further action is necessary at this time. That was it. After everything I'd done to resolve it the right way, to be respectful, to follow their process, to give them the benefit of the doubt, that was their answer. No explanation, no hearing, no proof, just stonewalling. Silence, arrogance, and that's when it broke something in me, because for months I'd been giving them credit they didn't deserve. I'd assumed we were just on different sides of a misunderstanding. But this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a setup, a racket, and I was done playing fair. I don't know what exactly I was looking for when I knocked on Liam Trevor's door. Maybe a little confirmation that I wasn't going insane. Maybe just someone else who remembered the neighborhood before Karen turned it into a gated community without the gate. Liam was the first HOA president back when we moved in. Retired Coast Guard. Honest guy. Wore 2 short shorts and always smelled faintly like WD-40 and aftershave. He'd left the board years ago after his wife got sick and moved to Florida. I didn't even know he'd come back until I saw him walking his daughter's Schnauzer a few blocks over. I caught him in his driveway one afternoon washing his truck in a pair of flip-flops. He squinted at me like he wasn't sure who I was, then said, "You're Carter, right? Garage windows guy?" I laughed. "That's me, local criminal." He chuckled, then said, "I heard Karen's been on a tear lately. What did she hit you with? Architectural violations or mail fraud?" I told him everything. The fines, the lien, the letters, the silence. He didn't look surprised. Instead, he shook his head slowly and said, "You know what your problem is? You're asking for logic from a woman who doesn't believe in breaks." We ended up sitting on his porch with 2 warm Coors Lights and the afternoon sun sinking into the pine trees, and that's when he said it. "You ever seen the original covenants?" I blinked. "You mean the bylaws?" "No," he said, leaning forward. "I mean the actual recorded declarations, the real stuff, the one we filed with the county when the HOA got set up, back when things were still done by the book." He stood up and walked inside. Came back a minute later with a dusty manila folder so old the edges had curled. Inside were scanned copies of what looked like court-stamped documents, thick, dry legalese, page after page of community guidelines, recorded signatures, and registration stamps from Rockdale County. "This," he said, tapping the front page, "is what Channing Cove was built on. Everything after that, amendments. And if the amendments weren't voted on properly and filed with the clerk's office, they don't mean squat." I started flipping through it, and it hit me. These weren't just rules. These were the real rules, the ones Karen was supposed to be following. I asked him if he had a digital copy. He said no, but he had something better. The physical notarized originals were in his storage unit, along with HOA records from his presidency. He kept them just in case someone tried to get cute down the line. "Guess what, Elias?" he said. "Karen got cute." He handed me the folder and said, "Compare that to whatever version she's been passing around. If anything in her playbook contradicts this, you've got her." That night, I was up until almost 3, sitting at the kitchen table with 2 stacks of paper, 3 highlighters, and a migraine that could have killed a horse. Danielle came in, saw the mess, and just slid a mug of coffee beside me, didn't say a word, just put her hand on my shoulder. She knew I wasn't just chasing ghosts anymore, there was something here. It didn't take long to find it. The first thing that jumped out, Karen's version of the HOA rules, the one posted on the official community portal, included a clause that said the board could issue fines without community input as long as a quorum of officers signed off. The original said all monetary penalties over $100 required a recorded vote by at least 51% of all homeowners, with documentation filed with the county within 30 days. That wasn't just a loophole, that was a grenade. It meant that every fine over $100, including mine, was illegal unless the board had followed that exact process, and I knew they hadn't. I checked the county records. No such filings existed. No votes, no filings, no homeowner ballots, nothing. Just Karen's little shadow, council making up rules and hiding behind that flamingo logo PDF like it was the Constitution. And there was more. The original covenants listed board term limits, 2 years max per officer. Karen had been in power for over a decade. If those term limits were never formally amended and filed, then every year after her second term, she'd been operating as an illegitimate president. That meant the decisions she made, the fines she issued, the committees she created, all of it, technically void. I sat back in my chair and stared at that folder like it was glowing, not because I suddenly had the upper hand, not yet, but because I was holding the blueprint, the real blueprint, the one Karen thought nobody had. For months I'd been gaslit into thinking I was the one out of line, that I was making trouble, that I just didn't understand the process. But now I had the receipts. This wasn't just about me anymore. Karen had rewritten the rules and never registered the changes. She'd issued fines with no authority. She'd lied about her position. And she'd buried the real documents so deep, nobody even thought to ask if what she was doing was legal. But I knew now, I saw it, and I wasn't going to be the only one. That night, for the first time in months, I felt calm, because I wasn't cornered anymore. I had a weapon, and I had a plan to use it. I kept that manila folder in the glove box of my truck, like it was the damn Declaration of Independence. Didn't tell anybody outside my family I had it, not even Liam, which felt a little shady, considering he was the one who handed it over, but something in me knew. This only worked if I moved quiet. I wasn't going to win this thing by yelling on the street or sending more angry emails. That's what they wanted. That's how they framed people like me. Loud, disruptive, unstable. I needed to be surgical. Cold. One step at a time. So first, I got my hands on every document Karen had ever claimed was official. I downloaded everything from the HOA portal. Cross-referenced every PDF, took screenshots, even ran some of them through a metadata checker just to see when they'd been created. And wouldn't you know it, half those amended rules were dated long after the so-called vote dates listed on them. Danielle helped me organize it all, not because she wanted to, she was still scared we were going to lose the house, but because I think she saw something change in me. I wasn't panicked anymore. I wasn't reacting. I was building. Even Jayla noticed. One night she came into the living room while I was typing and said, "You look like you're doing math and revenge at the same time." I said, "That's exactly what this is." I reached back out to that nonprofit group in Atlanta, the HOA watchdog folks, sent them a sample of what I'd found. They couldn't represent me officially, but one of their staffers offered to put me in touch with a guy they knew, a lawyer who'd sued 3 different HOAs in Georgia and won every single time. His name was Raymond Glass, looked like he belonged in a barbershop quartet, spoke like a man who'd been disappointed by everything except courtroom wins. When I showed him the side-by-side of Karen's fake bylaws and the original covenants Liam had given me, he nodded slowly, like a doctor looking at an X-ray with a tumor shaped like the word gotcha. "You know what you got here, Mr. Carter?" he said, flipping the folder shut. "You got a loaded gun. Now we just got to figure out where to aim it." He offered to take the case. "Fiat. Contingency basis. I didn't have to pay him unless we won." Danielle was nervous. She kept asking what the worst-case scenario was, but deep down, she knew it was either this or let them steal our house and keep doing it to everyone else. So we got to work. Raymond filed an open records request with the county clerk's office to confirm, on paper, that Karen had never submitted proper amendments. He pulled bank statements from HOA accounts through discovery motions. I didn't even know you could do that. But apparently, once you file a civil suit, you can demand a whole lot of answers. At the same time, I reached out to Daniel Mercado, my tech-savvy neighbor. I'd kept him out of this for a while, didn't want him getting caught in the crossfire, but now I needed someone who could dig deeper into the HOA's financial spreadsheets. He agreed to help, quietly. Said, "I always knew something was off with them, just didn't know how to prove it." Together, we built a timeline. Every illegal fine, every fake vote, every fabricated amendment, every dollar that left the HOA account with no invoice to back it up. We matched names, dates, figures, PDFs, and email threads. Daniel found duplicates in the financial files, entries labeled differently but identical in value, repeated across quarters like they were laundering monopoly money. Meanwhile, I started talking to neighbors again. Not all of them, just a few I trusted. Miss Paulette. The Washingtons at the end of the block. A newer couple who'd been fined $150 for putting up Halloween lights before October. I didn't go around shouting about lawsuits or trying to start a mutiny, I just asked questions. Have you ever seen an actual vote take place? Did you get to vote on the new landscaping feed last spring? Did they ever give you copies of their audits? Most folks hadn't. Some hadn't even realized there was supposed to be a vote. A few admitted they didn't even know who else was on the board besides Karen. That's how tight her grip was. She'd made the whole thing so opaque, people just stopped asking, but they were listening now, and I was collecting stories. Raymond told me to keep records of all of it, not just violations, but patterns. Show the judge it wasn't just about me, it was systematic. That's where the power would come from. Not a single homeowner pissed off about a lien, but a community that had been muzzled, fleeced, and silenced for years. I even got Liam to write a formal statement. He signed it, had it notarized, and everything. Said that when he handed over the presidency, he never approved the changes Karen claimed. Said he'd never authorized her to remove term limits or fine structures. Said the vote counts listed on her documents never happened. That letter became the cornerstone of our case. By the end of that month, I had a binder thick enough to kill a small raccoon. Raymond looked through it all and said, "This isn't a defense. This is a counterattack. She won't see it coming." And maybe that's what gave me the most peace. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I wasn't playing defense. I wasn't trying to survive the HOA anymore. I was coming for them, and I was bringing the truth with me. Filing the lawsuit didn't feel like kicking in the door. It felt more like sliding a sealed envelope across a table in a quiet room, while everyone pretended nothing was wrong. Raymond submitted everything to the court, civil suit against the HOA of Channing Cove, naming the board in their official capacity, with Karen Masters sitting right at the top. We weren't suing her personally yet, but the writing was on the wall. She knew it, and you could feel it in the air. They went quiet for a little while after that. No fines, no new threats, no mailbox notices, not even a newsletter. Like a bear crawling back into its cave after taking a hit it didn't expect. But then Karen struck back. One morning, I opened my inbox and saw it, an email blast to the whole neighborhood titled Urgent, Community Update Regarding Legal Disruption. She'd written it like I was some anarchist trying to dismantle the HOA for personal gain, said I was pursuing costly and divisive litigation, that I was wasting community funds, and, my personal favorite, that I was emotionally reactive and legally misinformed. Emotionally reactive. "Lady, you tried to steal my house over window glass." She painted the picture well, though, claimed that defending against my frivolous lawsuit had already cost thousands in legal fees. She never mentioned those fees were coming from everyone's dues, not just hers. And then she had the nerve to ask for voluntary contributions to a legal defense fund. I could feel it, people getting nervous. Danielle told me she overheard two women at the grocery store whispering that I was trying to bankrupt the HOA. Jayla came home from school and said one of her friend's moms told her she should be careful what her dad says around here. I was ready for that. I printed the original declaration documents, real ones, with county stamps and Liam's signed affidavit, and slid copies into every mailbox on our street. Nothing dramatic, no flyers with flames or bold red text, just facts. Then I created a basic site. No design, no nonsense. Just a plain page with PDFs, side-by-sides of the fake and real covenants, proof of unregistered amendments, and a calm write-up explaining what was happening and why it mattered. I titled it, "What They Don't Want You to Know About Our HOA." I didn't even share it publicly. I just emailed the link to a few neighbors I trusted and let it spread the way all good things do in suburban communities, one whispered conversation at a time. People started reaching out. Miss Paulette called me and said, "Baby, I knew something smelled wrong. I just didn't know what it was." Daniel told me someone slid a $20 bill into his mailbox with a note that said, "Thanks for helping Elias." And then the real hammer dropped. We got the audit. As part of discovery, Raymond had requested the last 10 years of HOA financials, receipts, invoices, account statements. After some legal arm twisting, their lawyer turned over a banker's box of printouts and flash drives. Daniel and I tore through it. There were thousands of dollars paid to companies with no listed services. A landscaping vendor that was actually Karen's nephew. Payments for document services that traced back to a Gmail address. And a $7,000 legal fee from the previous year tied to a lawsuit that never went to court because they'd settled privately and made the community pay the bill. Raymond pulled it all together into a brutal amendment to the suit, now listing misappropriation of funds and fraudulent governance. And that's when Karen panicked. She called for an emergency board meeting, closed to residents, of course, but word got around anyway. One of the newer board members, a woman named Yvonne, showed up at my door after it ended and said, "I can't be a part of this. She's trying to bury it. Told us to delete emails, said the documents were unofficial drafts. She even threatened to sue us if we talked." I asked if she'd be willing to give a statement. She said, "I'll do more than that." Yvonne became our inside line. She gave us access to messages, vote records, internal memos, all the little things that showed this wasn't just negligence. It was deliberate. Karen had rewritten the system piece by piece quietly in the background and bullied everyone into silence along the way. With Yvonne's help, we added breach of fiduciary duty and unauthorized governance to the filing. And then came the media. I didn't plan for that. But a local reporter from Channel 11 somehow found the site Daniel and I put up, and next thing I knew, a white van with a satellite dish was parked near the front entrance of Channing Cove. They aired a short segment titled HOA or Hostage Situation. It showed my house, my crepe myrtle, and a slow zoom on one of the fake HOA letters. They interviewed Miss Paulette. Liam gave a quote. Even Raymond looked smug on camera, and the day after the piece aired, that was the first time Karen didn't wave from her porch. Instead, she slammed her front door the second I pulled out of the driveway. The neighborhood shifted. More people spoke up. Someone started a petition to recall the board. Several folks emailed me asking how to join the lawsuit. It wasn't just my fight anymore. Still, it wasn't over. Karen filed a countersuit claiming defamation. She argued I'd irreparably harmed her reputation and caused mental anguish. I'll admit, she had nerve. Raymond handled it without blinking. Let her file. She's bluffing. She's hoping you'll fold. I didn't. Because at that point, I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't hiding. I was done being the guy who tried to play nice with a crooked system. This was war. But this time, I was winning. The HOA board meeting was packed. You could feel it before you even walked in. The tension, the shift, like a dam about to break. People who hadn't shown up in years were sitting in folding chairs, arms crossed, documents in hand. I saw neighbors I hadn't spoken to in months. Even the guy who never leaves his house without golf shorts and a Bluetooth earpiece was sitting in the back row, dead silent. This wasn't your usual HOA gathering. This was a reckoning. Karen walked in with that same smug church lady composure she always wore, like nothing rattled her. Hair sprayed into perfection. Pearl necklace, clipboard tucked tight to her chest. But something was off. Her eyes kept darting toward the back. She knew. She just didn't know how bad it was about to get. Raymond sat next to me, cool as a freezer, with a stack of folders at his feet. He didn't say much. He never did at these things, but he didn't need to. The energy in the room was loud enough. Folks weren't whispering anymore. Karen banged the little gavel, cleared her throat, and tried to kick off the meeting like it was business as usual. Reading minutes, treasurer's report, old business. But the second she opened the floor for community comments, 3 hands shot up before she even finished the sentence, and just like that, the dam broke. Miss Paulette was the first. She stood up, voice shaking but steady, and said, "I want to know why I was fined $75 for a plastic flower pot when the board can't even show me where our dues are going." Karen tried to cut her off. "Miss Paulette, this isn't the appropriate—" "No, Karen," she snapped. "It is appropriate. I've been paying fees for 16 years, and I want some damn answers." Applause, honest to God, applause. In a community center, then the Washingtons got up. They'd been fined for excessive yard decor around Christmas. Said they'd asked for documentation and never got it. Asked if anyone had voted on the lighting policy that suddenly appeared in the rules last year. Karen turned red. She started flipping pages, looking for something, anything, to get back control. And then Raymond stood. "I'm Mr. Carter's attorney," he said, voice like thunder in a library, "and we'd like to formally submit the following documents to the board and the community for review." He handed a copy of the original covenants to the board, then another to the crowd. He turned to face the room. "What you're looking at is the real governing document of Channing Cove, the one that was filed and registered with the county, the one that legally defines how this HOA is supposed to operate." He flipped a page. "You'll notice it includes term limits. Limits which were never lawfully amended, and fines over $100. Require a community vote, one that never happened." Dead quiet. He kept going. Showed the side-by-side of the fraudulent amendments. The fake votes, the altered PDF metadata. He laid it all out, clear, calm, undeniable, and then he dropped the financials. Line items with no receipts, payments to Karen's relatives. Duplicate entries. Memos, instructing board members not to discuss budgets in public. The misappropriation wasn't just shady, it was textbook fraud. You could feel it happening in real time. Karen shrinking. She tried to interrupt. This is all being taken out of context. These are working drafts. The board followed. No, said Yvonne, standing up from the other side of the table. We didn't follow anything. You made this up as you went. Karen looked like she'd been punched in the stomach. Yvonne held up her resignation letter. I'm stepping down effective immediately, and I will testify under oath to everything I've seen in the last 2 years. Karen sat back down. Didn't say another word. Someone else called for a vote. Loud, clear. We move to remove the current board in its entirety and appoint an interim oversight committee until proper elections can be held. Hands went up. More than half the room. It was over. Just like that. Karen didn't argue. She didn't gavel it down. She didn't even look up. She just sat there, eyes locked on some invisible spot on the table, holding that clipboard like it was going to shield her from what came next. After the meeting, neighbors who'd avoided me for months came over and shook my hand. Miss Paulette gave me a hug that cracked my back. Someone handed Jayla a bouquet of flowers, no clue where they got them. People were smiling again, not polite smiles. Relieved ones, like they'd been holding their breath for years and finally exhaled. Raymond pulled me aside on the way out. This isn't done yet, he said. We still have the lawsuit. She's going to try to negotiate a settlement now. I asked him what he thought we should do. He looked me dead in the eye and said, We don't settle. Not after this. Not after what she put you through. We finish it. I nodded, because he was right. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about all of us who'd been lied to, intimidated, and made to feel small in our own homes. And now, the lights were on. Everybody could see who'd been pulling the strings, and Karen Masters had nowhere left to hide. Sometimes I still catch myself checking the mailbox like I'm expecting another one of those HOA letters. It's dumb, I know. The board's gone, the lawsuit's behind us, the lien was wiped clean, and Karen, she moved out a few months after the court ordered the financial audit. For sale, sign popped up without warning. House was empty in a week. No goodbye, no note, just gone. But you don't go through something like that without it changing how you look at things. I walk a little slower through the neighborhood now. I notice who waves, who stops to chat. We've got new people here. Young couple down the block just had their first baby. The Washingtons put up Halloween lights before October this year, just to make a point. Miss Paulette added a second flower pot to her porch like it was a victory flag. Little stuff, but it matters. We've got an interim board now. Real elections are coming up, and this time, folks actually care. People ask questions. They want to know where the money goes, who's on what committee, what the rules actually are, and no one's afraid to say when something feels off. That might be the best part. That silence Karen built. It's gone. As for me, I'm back to running my business full time. Jayla's working on a new mural downtown, something with a tree growing through concrete. Danielle says it reminds her of us. I like that. We finally repainted the garage door too. Not because of the windows, hell no, those are staying, but because it had faded in the sun, and it just felt like time for something new. Jayla picked the color. Sort of a charcoal gray, sharp, clean. Looks damn good under the crepe myrtle. The tree's taller than ever now. Reaches all the way past the second floor. Sometimes I just sit out there under it, cold, drink in hand, listening to the wind in the branches and the sound of my neighborhood breathing easy again. I think about how close I came to losing it all. Not just the house, but the peace, the pride, the feeling that what I built with my own hands actually meant something. I think about the hours I wasted trying to be polite, trying to reason with people who never had any intention of being reasonable. I think about how many folks go through the same thing and never push back because they think it's hopeless, or it's too expensive, or it's not worth the fight. But I also think about what happens when you do fight, when you dig in and document everything and refuse to be intimidated, when you stay calm while they try to make you snap, when you outlast the nonsense. It doesn't make you a hero, it doesn't make you famous, but it does make you free. People ask me now if I'd do it all over again, knowing how hard it was. And yeah, I would, every second of it. Because I didn't just win a case, I reclaimed my home, and I made damn sure no one here will ever forget who it belongs to.